Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode here on Switch City. I'm your host Bruce Veliz, and in today's episode we're going to be diving in and doing another one of our off-season breakdown and NBA season previews as we dive into each NBA team leading up to the 2025-2026 NBA season. And in today's episode we're going to be diving in and exploring the Los Angeles Lakers, a team in the Wild West that made some big moves at the trade deadline that recently reshaped their roster and their direction for how they want to build it out. And dealing with some injuries already into the year, we can break down how the Lakers are going to kind of find their way through this tough and difficult conference. We're going to dive in and do all of that next. So make sure to let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Without further ado, let's dive in and let's break down the Lakers. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier in the introduction just recently, the Lakers have made a bunch of moves the last couple of seasons to kind of, put them into this title contention with LeBron James and try to, go all in on that. And seemingly last year it looked like maybe that was going to kind of fizzle out and kind of look a little bit gloomy with the Lakers' ability to have not that much draft capital. But the Lakers somehow pulled a magic rabbit out of their hat and landed Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis, which no slight to Anthony Davis. He is a top tier player across the league, but when you compare it to Luka Doncic, who is arguably one of the three best players, if not five best players in the NBA, and being seemingly under 27 years old of age, not even into his prime yet, that's just unfathomable that they were able to swing something like that. So it completely changes the direction for the Lakers and truly sets them up for a better path of success. So we're going to dive in and explore the Lakers offseason, going over who they added to kind of bolster that, who they ultimately lost, and how this roster can really contend in this Western Conference. So first off, as always, let's go over the additions for the Lakers. And they didn't make any trades this offseason. Kind of shocking for a Los Angeles Lakers team to not make trades, but they ultimately made their moves on the free agency market and basically out there on the buyout market, as two or three of their players that they had ended up signing here were all waived by their respective teams, which only one of them signed a free agent contract. That one player being Jake LaRavia, who came over from the Sacramento Kings. Jake LaRavia is a solid two-way wing who got drafted to the Memphis Grizzlies and ultimately was moved from the Grizzlies at the deadline as they were trying to shed some salary there to help them out with the luxury movements and apron restrictions that they have, being an apron team. And since they had so much depth in that wing position with young guys like Vince Williams and G.G. Jackson, guys that had kind of panned out from their two ways, Jake LaRavia had kind of fizzled out there. He ended up winding up in Sacramento being exactly what the Kings kind of needed on the two-way wing, but unfortunately Sacramento just isn't that big of a team and is a smaller market and couldn't ultimately captivate to Jake LaRavia that he should want to stick there to continue to develop and grow, and could have been a vital part of their team because he goes and even stays in LA, but goes and signs with the Lakers, playing with his good old friend Austin Reeves. I think he's going to be a fantastic fit for this Lakers team ultimately as a two-way wing, and someone that I'm really, really intrigued on from this Lakers squad with his growth and development, specifically with this younger core that the Lakers are trying to push now, obviously building around Luka Doncic. They also went and got two guys on the buyout market, DeAndre Ayton and Marcus Smart. Ayton was bought out from the Portland Trailblazers after not having any success with them following being traded there for Damian Lillard, with them seemingly drafting a center the last two seasons, taking Donovan Clingan and Yang Hansen. The time is up for DeAndre Ayton over in Portland. He now looks to try to bounce back and actually be a vital part for the Los Angeles Lakers, as it was clear and evident that after the Lakers, even when the Lakers had Anthony Davis, that they needed a center, but when they didn't have Anthony Davis, that it was even a bigger issue. And that was one of the main cruxes for this Lakers team's success last year in the playoffs. So hopefully by adding DeAndre Ayton, they can ultimately aid and fix that, but I don't necessarily know if that's going to go to plan because we've seen DeAndre Ayton not really be the most active and seemingly being a little bit lazy on both sides of the ball. And then lastly, they picked up Marcus Smart, who was bought out from the Washington Wizards. Once again, he was on the Memphis Grizzlies heading into last season, but was traded at the deadline, similar to Jake LaRavia, like with the Grizzlies trying to shed some more salary. He ultimately got sent to the Washington Wizards, where he was a good veteran for their team, but wasn't really going to stick. And with them picking up other veterans in trades like C.J. McCollum and etc., Marcus Smart necessarily wasn't a fit for the direction of the Wizards because they had a logjam of guards with their young development and Bob Carrington and Trey Johnson, but also with their veteran players as well. So they move off of a player, and Marcus Smart, he winds up with the Lakers getting recruited by Luka Doncic, mainly being that X factor, seemingly saying, I hated playing against you, let's team up together, and that's what they're seemingly going to do. I think Smart is going to be a great compliment for the Lakers, as much as it pains me to say that because I am a Boston Celtics fan. I do think Marcus Smart, and it's going to pay me to see him in those colors, I do think Marcus Smart is exactly kind of what this Lakers team needs in a defensive guard and someone to complement Luka Doncic's discrepancies on that side of the ball, and someone that can also be a secondary playmaker. And as long as he can stay healthy, he can be viable for their team. They also added Nick Smith Jr., who was recently waived by the Charlotte Hornets. If you missed my Charlotte Hornets preview, go check that out. But I stated in there that they still are over the roster limit, and were well over the roster limit in free agency. At one point, I believe they had 18 standard contracts signed, and Nick Smith, unfortunately, was one of them. He was ultimately waived, as younger guards have kind of paved their way with their new culture and with their new head coach. Nick Smith wasn't part of that old regime, so he gets kind of pushed out. But with that being said, he still is a creative offensive guard as a playmaker and a three-point shooter. And for a team in the Los Angeles Lakers who desperately could rely on that, just on low-value contracts, specifically with Luka Doncic and LeBron James really functioning well with their playmaking ability, with having those spot-up shooters on the perimeter, a guy Nick Smith Jr., if he pans out on this two-way contract that he did secure, he could be a viable part for this Lakers team into that younger direction, like I mentioned earlier. They also drafted one player in this draft, and that was a Dude Thero, the wing, who was very highly regarded for his athleticism, and someone, once again, who, if he does pan out, could be very nice for the Lakers. And then they have three players on two-way contracts: Chris Mannon, Nick Smith Jr., like I mentioned, who they just recently signed, and also someone that they had last year on a two-way contract in Christian Koloko. He had been recently cut by the Raptors, then signed with the Lakers, dealt with some blood clot stuff that ultimately did not end his career like some other players, but has now found himself on a two-way contract, competing in that center room with guys like DeAndre and Jackson Hayes. So now that we went over who the Lakers added and their two-way players, let's go over who the Lakers ultimately lost as well, because they did lose some key pieces. So who the Lakers ultimately ended up losing were a wing player in free agency in Dorian Finney-Smith, who they ultimately, on the reports, tried to tank the trade value or free agency value by saying his injury was more severe than it has led to be on. Now, Finney-Smith is going to be out to start the season, so this injury definitely is still lingering, but who knows to say if that was the Lakers doing or anything like that. He goes to the Houston Rockets. He obviously was a vital piece of their switchability and wing defense, as he was a late addition to their team in the playoffs, specifically when Jared Vanderbilt went down. By adding Jake LaRavia, they basically are hoping to replace that with a younger player that can maybe be more beneficial for them for the future. They also went and waived Jordan Goodwin. His contract got picked up by the Phoenix Suns. He once again was their defensive guard that they had in this rotation. That was one of their better on-ball defenders, but by picking up Marcus Smart and also having Bronny James in this roster, they ultimately don't need Jordan Goodwin. They also lost Trey Jemison, who was on a two-way contract picked up by the Lakers in the late season to be kind of a filler for that center position. He ultimately gets a two-way deal with the New York Knicks. And then Alex Len, as we all know, was the big signing by the Lakers at the deadline, where Lakers fans went, oh my God, Alex Len, he's going to save the day. And we all saw how that ultimately went down. Len ends up on an Exhibit 9 deal with the Knicks, trying to compete for a roster spot there. And then lastly, there are two players on the Los Angeles Lakers that are either unsigned or overseas. Markieff Morris remains unsigned. He is no longer on a team, but Shake Milton is now overseas. So that being said, let's look at this Lakers roster here. We see from the point guard, Luka Doncic, Gabe Vincent, and Bronny James. Luka Doncic obviously going to be that creator facilitator. Gabe Vincent, a sharp shooter off the bench. Hopefully that can have a solid three-point shooting season. And Bronny James can develop into a defensive gritty guard. Got Austin Reeves, who is another solid playmaker and solid shot creator. Someone to keep an eye on, I think, for the Lakers. I think they want to keep him. With him kind of overlapping with Luka Doncic, I would not be shocked if kind of in this movement they did look to move off of him to get a little bit of an upgrade. Marcus Smart also going to be that defensive guard and once again playmaker within this Lakers unit. In the wing room, they have Rui Hachimura, Jake LaRavia, Dalton Connect, and a Dude Thero. Dalton Connect had a little bit of a weak summer league, which has turned a lot of people off of him from Laker Nation and outside. But ultimately, I do think he can still be, in his second year, a solid catch-and-shoot scorer off the bench. Like I stated, Jake LaRavia, someone that I'm very high on. A Dude Thero could be a young wing athlete that could develop. All eyes I'm keeping on within this wing room here, as I think this could really solidify their depth here at this position, because specifically with LeBron James already dealing with an injury in sciatica and having to kind of, not really an injury, but dealing with sciatica and having to deal with that, that's going to take some time, and they're going to need that additional help there. And if that doesn't really come through this season, or once again, a guy in Jared Vanderbilt kind of playing that backup power forward position who's dealt with injuries, unfortunately, throughout his entire career, seemingly gets them for the Lakers again. This could be a big hole for them if none of these guys really step up. But Rui Hachimura, another wing that is kind of a switchable one, can play the 3 or the 4. I really like his flexibility within this Lakers unit. Once again, could be another tradable asset or contract for this Lakers team if he doesn't really stand out, similar to kind of Jared Vanderbilt if he does stay injured. But once again, he's one of the better defenders in the league when healthy, so I'd like to see him be able to stay that. And then Maxi Kleber, I don't really have much belief in Maxi Kleber. I think he's a kind of a tradable contract for the Lakers. We'll have to wait and see. The stretch big can provide some help for the Lakers with some shooting, because obviously the center is the weakest position with guys like DeAndre Ayton and Jackson Hayes. Jackson Hayes, once again, I don't really have full confidence. Maybe can be an alright backup center, but we've already seen with his time with the Lakers these last couple of seasons that he hasn't really been able to do too much to really stand out, and I don't necessarily think he's going to do that this season. And then ultimately the timing test is DeAndre Ayton. If the Lakers do not find success with Ayton and LeBron James is able to come back and they look somewhat decent in center is the issue, I would not be shocked if they look to either move DeAndre into the bench and get another center in, or look to move DeAndre Ayton and try to fix this thing, because I do think the Lakers are going to want to compete. They're going to want to be towards the top, but with this kind of injury-riddled team, kind of, team with history of some older veterans, I'm not really necessarily that confident into the squad this season, ultimately. And I think this is where they come to play in the Western Conference, coming in at 8th. Now, I do think they make the play-in. I do think that they most likely are a playoff team, right? I won't lie to you. I do think that the 7th and 8th seed in this Western Conference will make it over the Dallas Mavericks and the Phoenix Suns, and respectively, they are better than these teams. But I do think, compared to some of these teams in this Western Conference, they are a little bit weaker due to the fact that they are older in age, and specifically with LeBron James now dealing with sciatica and going to be out for the start of the season. This is definitely going to hinder their wing room and their ability to show that flexibility. Now, obviously, if guys step up, if they do look pretty solid, I'll change my mind and obviously say I was wrong on the Los Angeles Lakers. But going into this season, I don't feel confident into their center rotation. With LeBron James continuing to get older, even though I love LeBron James and respect the hell out of LeBron James, I don't know if this core is really built for him. And I think for the Los Angeles Lakers, they clearly see the path at the end of the tunnel with Luka Doncic and really restructuring and building this team around him. And I think that's what they made clear with kind of going with some of these signings, right? Jake LaRavia, Nick Smith Jr., the drafting of Adu Diarra, obviously guys that can fill in and play that wing room and could be, solid contributors. Obviously, DeAndre Ayton, Marcus Smart, those are going to be guys that are going to fill out this roster, be considerable veterans, help them try to get into the playoffs and be a playoff contender. But if that's not the case for this team, I wouldn't be shocked if at the end of this season, or when these contracts do end up coming up to play for the Los Angeles Lakers, they are looking to kind of shift into a different direction and obviously go younger. Now, with Luka Doncic on this Los Angeles Lakers team, there's always going to be someone that is attracted to want to go to their team or want to go there when LeBron James eventually does leave. So it's not like the Lakers are going to be essentially bad with Luka Doncic and have to kind of reset that way. They're just going to have to wait for that opportunity, which I do think is in, a little bit of due time, maybe at least maybe 3 seasons for the Lakers to really be able to have that new core around Luka Doncic, and that's when we'll see a little bit of a different beast. But at this moment, I think that the teams ahead of the Los Angeles Lakers are just a little bit more powerful. You could argue that maybe the team that I have in 7th is a little bit worse. I could argue that they kind of go back and forth. But this is where I come into the Los Angeles Lakers. 8th into the rankings here in the Western Conference. I do think that they are a playoff team, and I do think that they have a good enough roster to be better, but ultimately the depth here with Gabe Vincent and the injury complexity of Jared Vanderbilt and the uncertainty of these center position really has me on question with the Los Angeles Lakers. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, what you guys ultimately think on this Los Angeles Lakers team. If you think I'm right, If you think I'm wrong, if your team has not been mentioned yet, I guarantee you guys, I know the season is coming up closer, and you might be thinking, how are you going to get all these teams out before the start of the season? You're not even halfway yet. This is your halfway point video, but I guarantee it to you guys, we will cover every single team before the start. So if your team hasn't come yet, I guarantee you they will. So make sure to stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button. As like I said, there will be NBA content coming out on this channel, obviously leading up to the season with all these off-season previews. But then after, once the season does start, we're going to start diving in, breaking down some teams, looking at certain players, just talking about the NBA in general, potential trades, stuff like that. And we're going to have a lot of fun here on this channel as I try to grow it this season. So I really do appreciate all the love and support that you guys do show here. So thank you guys so much. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.